presenter for this evening in this room is Annie Arnoldy. Annie is the mom of 3 kids under the age of 5. Right? Her twins, Noah and Maya, are 4.5 years old, and the baby girl, Emerson, is 11 months old. Last year at this time, she was not with us because she was hugely pregnant. Hugely, it says. Over the last 4 years, while on family leave, Annie has served on the board of directors of a nonprofit called Light Gives Heat. They create media worth watching, and their current project is a web TV show called The Find. 2 years ago, Annie's life was profoundly changed by serving on staff at a teen homeless shelter. Recently, Annie has asked to be relieved of family leave because it's exhausting. We're going to be glad to have her back off of leave, and she has served in this conference as an elder since 2005. And so we'll turn it over to Annie.
Can you remember times in your life when you felt talked about rather than talked to? It happens a lot to kids, teenagers, and aging parents. My parents live with us right now. It's maddening. Just talk to me. If you want to know what I'm thinking or feeling, just talk to me. That's justified anger, I think. It reminds me of the book, The Sneetches, by Dr. Seuss. When the Starbelly Sneetches had Frankfurter roasts, or picnics or parties or marshmallow toasts, they never invited the Plainbelly Sneetches. They left them out in the cold, out in the dark of the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near. And that's how they treated them year after year. Well, you may know that I'm talking about the LGBT community because that's what the name of my talk was. It doesn't really matter if you have a side or even what your stance is on any number of issues that might connect with the LGBT community. The fact of the matter is they are a community who has largely been left out year after year. Church should be the most open place there is, and for many people, it feels far from inviting. During the past 4 years at home with my kids, I've had the opportunity to volunteer for our church's growing youth ministry, and then I spent 8 months at a teen homeless shelter called The House, and I was their volunteer coordinator. Well, through mentoring relationships, I've learned the struggles that teens are having. They're coming from broken homes, they have identity issues, they're struggling with depression, drug use, violence, and attempted suicide. Growing up is not the awkward, fun thing it was for most of us. So many teens are growing up in families who have never been to church, or they're growing up in families that are just broken pieces. What I discovered in knowing homeless teens and teens in general is that it does not matter what the issues they're struggling with, it matters that they have a place to belong. In the past, if a teen did not find sanctuary at home, they could go to their church. Well, now teens don't seem to know the church because often their parents feel too broken to go. They fear judgment or plain old feeling left out. Well, in 3rd grade, I remember my first friend whose parents got divorced. It was a big deal. Whole families got left behind by the church because there was a condemnation on divorce, whether it was stated or not stated. It is in the Bible. Jesus actually does talk about it. Unlike being gay, which Jesus never actually talks about. I say that purely ironically. I decided to keep my mouth shut about all of it because I didn't know what to do. I just knew my first friends felt ostracized, and my parents didn't know how to talk to their parents anymore. Well, as a 6th grader, I remember having my first experience of forming my own opinion about somebody who was different from me. We went downtown to downtown Denver with our confirmation class, and we made sandwiches and fed the homeless community. And I think it was outside of Trinity United Methodist Church. I remember it was one of the first times I had been downtown, and I knew serving the homeless a meal was the right thing to do, but I had never interacted with somebody who was homeless that I could remember. So we were handing out sandwiches, and there was a particular man with a ponytail who noticed my UCLA t-shirt. He told me he was from California, and he asked if I wanted to go to UCLA. Not knowing really anything about UCLA, except that I liked the t-shirt, I said I did. We smiled at each other. Treating each other with dignity was the real gift in that act of service. So my parents basically had a rule growing up that my brother and I, we lived kind of south of the tech center, and they had a rule, an unspoken rule growing up, that my brother and I were not allowed to go near or beyond Colfax. It was all very mysterious to me. Well, then I went to Iliff. To this day, my parents are wide-eyed with half the things I bring up in normal conversation. I gained lots of friends during my time at Iliff, and many who identify with the LGBT community. My life is so much richer for that experience. It has only been with each individual that I've gotten to know over the years that I've become more and more open. And my heart has grown for the community. And there's no other way to move out from blocking a doorway than to move towards somebody and shake their hand. The church has an opportunity to be a light in a place of darkness to both teens and adults. Over the last several years, in volunteering with a growing youth group in Grand Junction, my husband and I saw that teens were bringing their friends. We never once saw the friends' parents. The place became safe for teens because they were bringing each other, and they were not waiting for their parents to find a church. The teens simply wanted that place of security, that place to belong. Well, if for no other reason than to provide sanctuary for teens, all teens, who are struggling with so many issues, the church must be a place of welcome for LGBTQ men and women of all ages. Instead of just saying the LGBT community, here's who I mean. I met a young woman, 19 at the time, who came to the house with her sister to find a safe place to stay. They grew up in a divorced household, living with their mother, who sold drugs, and allowed them to try smoking pot and drinking when they were 9 years old. They had different fathers, and the 19-year-old, Erica, had a stable father but never lived with him full time. He went on to get married again and had more children, and the new wife never felt comfortable having Erica be with the young children, so she never got to live with him. Well, her mom spent several stints in jail for selling drugs, and when she was not in jail, she had boyfriends coming and going. Erica was close with her grandma and grandpa, but when she told her family that she was gay, they said, "You don't need to come back until you have a boyfriend." Her mom was hitting her and her sister as a normal part of their lives and their upbringing, and that's when they found our teen homeless shelter called The House. Well, over the past 3 years, Erica has been self-sufficient with the help of The House. She's never had to return to living with her mom, and has since been able to see her mom through her own adult eyes, and she sees that her mom will never change her behavior. Erica is the one who has to set the boundaries, and as her mentor, I hear her pain about essentially losing her family once she decided to claim her own identity. She says her pain from loneliness is so strong that she doesn't want to live in this life anymore. She's tried committing suicide on many occasions, and she really has no tools for dealing with anything that is a trauma to her because she's been traumatized as a child. So if she loses her job, like recently happened, her world comes to an end, and it takes her a lot more than most of us to get back to a place where she's willing to go out and try again. And she doesn't have a lot of family to connect to. Well, she found a home at a church, and they try to help her in her struggle with various addiction issues. But it's not really about the substances at the core. It's about the acceptance of who she is, and she's still searching for that. She says she doesn't know who she is or what she is, but she basically stopped talking about it so that she could find acceptance at her church. They would not approve if she came out. So her struggle and her hurt continue. Another person close to my heart is one of my cousins. He's bright, engaging, he's a young adult and is college educated, and he comes from a solid family. He wanted to pursue the Peace Corps, and he got accepted, and he went to Mongolia, but he came home after 6 months, and it was a medical release, and he never really opened up about why. He pretty much lives somewhere for 6 months to a year, and then moves on to a new community. Why? I don't know. He recently told me he wants to get help for vices, as he puts it, food addiction and substance abuse. He's very involved with his new church that he's found since living in Denver. And his small group tells him not to get help. All he needs is Jesus. From everything I know about him, I believe he is probably gay, and he's scared to death to come out to his friends, his family, and his church community. And I really don't care. Every family story I hear about their gay or lesbian sons and daughters is that they're turning to drugs and alcohol in a secret life because there's no way for them to connect and live a normal life where they could find healthy community, like in a church. These young people are desperate for community and love and acceptance. And are we extending any kind of lifeline to them? This summer, I visited my friend Dale Frederickson's church, and he preached on the Serenity Prayer. Well, if you know it, feel free to say it with me. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Well, it hit me like a ton of bricks. The courage to change the things I can meant for me acting on behalf of my brothers and sisters in the LGBT community who don't have a voice in the church right now. The church is not a known place of safety or freedom for anyone who is gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. They do not know if they'll be accepted, and they don't know that it will be a welcoming atmosphere. So how do people on the margins get invited in? Well, it can't just be part of the church's mission or vision statement. It has to be advocated by the allies within the community of that church. As a new pastor 10 years ago, I was afraid to preach this welcoming message from the pulpit. But for the past 4 years, as I've stayed home with my kids and observed the church as most parishioners do, taking part in some ministries but not really speaking on any platform as a leader in the church, now I see it is my responsibility as someone sitting in the pew and as somebody who's an ordained minister to speak from wherever I can to make a welcoming space for a community who's been marginalized in the past and who continues to question the authenticity of current invitations to participate in the Christian community. One of my favorite Bible stories, a true testament to Jesus' saving grace for all of us, even when we're trying to be our bravest, is Peter walking on the water. But this time, Peter wasn't the one trying to walk on the water to get to Jesus on the stormy sea. This time, it was a teenager, a teen from the LGBT community. First, Jesus says, "Come to me." But there's hesitation and fear. What if Jesus drops me into the water when I get a little closer? What if Jesus is calling me out to punish me? Then there is courage, the will to take a step out and believe that Jesus is authentically speaking to a single young person who has not known spiritual or communal support ever. Have faith, Jesus says. The teenage girl who identifies as a lesbian walks on the water. She's scared of the storm and the wild waves, and she starts to sink. Well, to me, we have been the storm and the wild waves. People who call themselves Christ followers, but do not say or do anything to make the water a little calmer, who are not speaking up when there's an act of hate or a call to judge someone. And by grace, Jesus catches her and pulls her up from the stormy sea and says to her, "Why did you doubt that I would save you?" Well, how would she even hear this story unless she felt invited and welcomed into the church? She needs to hear that she can be herself, just as we are ourselves. We who have the privilege to not walk on the margins need to spread the message that we are not going to judge, that we have doubts and imperfections and uncertainty. And we need to spread the message that we believe every person has gifts to share with the church, that the church cannot be the kingdom of God without every person, without inclusion. Jesus wanted nothing more than for every person to know unconditional love and radical grace. We're just walking the path together, but all must be invited and included and welcomed. I'd like to have a discussion, if we could, where people can be wherever they are. I don't expect us all to be at the same pace. page, on the same page, or having the same viewpoint. That's okay with me. But I do ask that you just speak from your heart. And I have several questions. And you can talk at your tables for some, and we can talk as a group for some. But I have been asked to repeat the question and answer so that it can be picked up. So after you have a comment, I'll be repeating it in the microphone. The place where I wanted to start is, as clergy, we tend to be more accepting or inclusive than our congregations, oftentimes. What are some ways you can think of to begin the conversation? To begin a more accepting, a more inclusive conversation with your congregation? And what are the ways we can reach out to the LGBT community itself? And I'll let you think on that. And I have a couple directions to go in. But that's something that, for me, I have many more questions than answers. And so far in my ministry, I have not served parishes that have been reconciling or anything. Just, pretty much your run-of-the-mill United Methodist congregations. And it's hard to have the conversation. But this summer, I was able to do a version of this talk at Father Dyer United Methodist with Claire. And it was great. You just don't know how it's going to go. And it went really well, and there were families there that needed to hear it, and that's why we're giving these messages. That's why we're saying these things, is because parents of children who have been hurting for a really long time are still coming and seeking us. So I would first ask, what do you think are some of the ways we could broach the subject with our congregations, and how can we perhaps be more invited? Go ahead. That's a great point. So two things, that it's the parents who also need support when they have children who are struggling with identity issues, and as churches we need to be able to help provide that support. And then, in addition, our youth can be the ones to bring the message to their parents. And when parents don't know how to find a church or don't know to, but yet their teens have maybe found a youth group, that those youth can bring the message home that they're all welcome.
I think sometimes we as pastors make assumptions that it's our youth that are part of the community, or its parents. Gay and lesbian and bi and trans folks also have children. And sometimes they're very much in the closet. And I think particularly, and even some of our clergy. Oh my goodness, Maggie, did you really say that out loud? Yes, I did. And I think we need to realize that we're speaking to a much broader audience than we oftentimes think we are.
You asked what we might do, and last year when I was too new in my first appointment to recognize what was being done to me, the clergy cluster in Montrose and Delta counties came together, and we started a series of community conversations. And is Vivian in here? And so I said, yes, the one on homosexuality in the church, you can do it, Delta United Methodist Church. I've been there 3 months. I'm sure they're okay with it. Anyway, yeah, I'm still there. And there were 6 or 7 of us churches, and all of the pastors committed to being there and bringing however many congregants they could. And we had a good turnout from Delta. And it was about 4 hours, and it was based on what we did at Clergy Orders last year with the small group questions and just starting the conversation. And Vivian Houston led it for us. And I didn't know what my congregation thought about it. Some said that they were glad we were talking about it. Others came to say we shouldn't be talking about it. But none of my congregation left because of it. And then the second most controversial community conversation was on praise music. So at the level of interest and concern, but the clergy cluster made a commitment to have this and to bring our congregation with us, and to, just to do that model that we did last year. It didn't cost anything, except for some coffee and cookies, but it opened up the communications about it.
I just love Carol. Do you all know Carol? She's just the best. I just love her. I love her decom when she got appointed to Delta. It's great. Well, who else would like to make a comment?
The single most important step in developing the periodic table.
I'm Phil Charman, and I served Fort Morgan for 18 years. And every church needs Susie. Susie was a member of the church. She was a foster child who was adopted by her foster parents. They had, over the years, about 150 foster children. Susie had some degree of mental retardation, but not a lot. And Susie was out. She only told her closest friends. She came into my office the third day I was there to tell me she was gay. And she told me she only told her closest friends. And then she'd come by and tell me who she had told. And her list had 400 or 500 people on it. We learned with Susie over the years that she wasn't just gay. She wanted to have a gender reversal. And there was no way that she could do that. And about, maybe 6 months before Susie died, her mother told her something she'd never known. When Susie was born, she was a hermaphrodite. And the doctor had done gender assignment. And it's much easier to make someone female than male. And Susie said, what makes a big difference? And when I did Susie's funeral, I shared that with the family's permission, with the whole town. Her funeral was one of the largest I did. But because of Susie, our church, they loved Susie. She was 20 years younger than I am, and she was in the choir. She was very verbal, very outgoing, and they just had to let Susie be part of our church. But because of her, through other conversations, I learned that we had at least 6 families who came out that they had a gay, lesbian, or transgender child. And so the conversation just kept rolling. And we had a man show up, a single man, working at the hospital. He loved music. He came to our choir. And when the choir did their Easter cantata, there was another man sitting in the congregation. And I introduced myself to him. I said, he was from Boulder. And he said, well, I have a friend who invited me to hear your cantata. And before too long, they were together in our congregation. And they were accepted. They both served on the board. One man is now the church's organist. And every so often, somebody would come up to me, and it was usually a little old lady, and she'd say, well, what do you think? Do you think maybe they're gay? And I said, well, maybe. What do you think? Well, they might be. And so, I think because of Susie, Fort Morgan is a place, I don't know if they'll ever become a reconciling congregation, but they have had the ability to accept and nurture and love people who are different. And I wish God would send all of our churches to Susie.
That's great.
Yeah, I wanted to tag on to what you just said. I'm Mark Marson. I'm serving First Year Cheyenne, and we're in the process of doing this. And I think what I have found is that if it becomes my issue, that I'm the standard bearer and it's the minister, that's not the approach. It's finding people in the congregation that that is how things move. It is through empowerment of the lay people who, and then they seem to be able to find their own way through it in their own time.
I really love these stories of encouragement.
And perhaps I'm beating the same drum to a certain degree, but as a pastor, I'm really comfortable grabbing a microphone and speaking in such a way as to appear to be an expert about whatever I'm talking about. Right, and we're all that way, and in some sense, I mean, folks here provided great stories on behalf of others and great witness, but at the same time, I'm a straight cisgender dude, and I can't tell these stories. And I think an issue becomes, even if the best intentions, even as allies, we stand up and speak as though we're experts without creating space and giving honor to the voices of LGBTQ people. And that is a mistake. Even if in your heart or in your congregation, this is an issue, right? Or this is somehow something that might be divisive. I still think that even in this room, I think I'm a little bit uncomfortable because.
Did anybody else want to comment about how we either bring the topic up in our congregations or how we support the community in general?
So we all know that we can preach it without naming it, right? You know what I mean by that. My question, preach loving all, take the story of let the little children come to me and redefine children as anyone who's on the margins, and how do we accept everyone and embrace them and bless them without naming sexuality as part of the equation. So my question is that a cop-out?
The answer is yes. I've heard it. Yeah, no, I think, I feel like what I told a couple people just in that they saw what my title was going to be and have commented to me, and our conversations have just kind of been, this is where I'm at now. You know, like I can't go back, and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't mean I don't know if I'll ever serve a reconciling congregation. I hope so, but it doesn't mean that that's going to happen or that that's even where I'm supposed to be. It's just that this is who I am and where I am now, and you know, I think that's what it is. But I think naming it is important as far as for me, knowing and really working with so many young people, knowing the teens and the young adults who have such struggles, like literally struggles with should I stay alive or should I not stay alive. That's important enough that I feel like I should name it and say this is because of sexual identity, and it shouldn't be causing people to die. But there's this whole host of other things that goes with it, which are how they're trying to cope. So it's substance abuse, and it's unsafe behaviors, and it's dealing with things in secret. And as one of my colleagues and I were just talking, like, yeah, where does a community of people go when they should funeral done or when their child is in crisis and they just don't know if the minister at the church down the street is a person to talk to? So I feel like that's why we have to name, you know, like, in whatever ways we can. And I feel like, I know, exactly. That's what I'm trying to come to. Elizabeth has an idea.
I would invite you to stop talking about it and do something. We have an opportunity to put our credentials on the line by conducting same-gendered marriages. We risk something by aligning ourselves with the margins and stepping outside of the middle of the page. And in that sense, you will create a reputation of being a person willing to walk as an ally with those that are on the margins versus sitting from your position of privilege and talking about the issue as if it's something that just happened on the TV.
Michael Dent, Trinity Church in Denver. I came to this conference a little over 9 years ago from a very conservative state and part of Methodism. Coming to Denver kind of opened my eyes, and about a year or two after coming to Trinity, two women came to our church, and they moved from Atlanta, and they basically said, "Are we welcome here?" I said, "Sure, you're welcome here." Well, there's nothing to indicate that. So every week since then, in our bulletin, always on our website, 24/7, there's a welcoming statement to all persons, whatever their sexual orientation, place of origin, whatever. It's very
clear right there for anyone to see who visits that. Second, I preached at least 3 sermons on homosexuality since I've been there. And then moved in 1971 called Bringing the L Word Home, Homosexuality, because the title. The L Word was not lesbian, it was love, but it was on a Methodist inclusiveness. And then when partnerships, did a sermon on partnerships about 2 years ago, that addressed our changing before the Supreme Court decision. That again, the line, Ecclesiastes 4:9-12 is a great text. Feel better. It's human text, personal and physical text. A young couple with 3 kids left the church, but I got 18 letters, 17 were thankful for the sermon. So you might be surprised at the response of people that support you with a message that's grace-filled and welcoming for people. We have a in our church who are partners, and we baptized their people in a cross service a few years ago. And we're happy days of the church. So I just share all that with you to say you may have more allies than you think, and the collateral damage that you may cause is minimal and it needs to happen anyway.
Good.
One great place to start is to find out what organizations in your community are already doing ally work or working with especially young people. The homeless youth resource centers, if you have anything that looks like that, I can guarantee you a good percentage of those folks are homeless because their families booted them out. In Salt Lake, that it runs 65% of our homeless youth have been told to leave their LDS families because of sexuality issues. If you have a pride center, don't just march in the pride parade, actually get involved in the center and sponsoring activities and getting to know people there. You'll find that they'll tell you exactly what they need.
The question you ask is, what is it something we can do? We can do something tonight if we choose to. I have here statements that people can sign up and be a Reconciling United Methodist. That doesn't mean that you have to be a part of a Reconciling Congregation. It doesn't mean that you give away $1 million. It's only signing up to get emails and being informed in terms of what's happening in terms of the Reconciling Ministries Network on a national basis. And I'd be happy to talk with people about it because I could talk all night about it. And I will leave these sheets right up here.
We'll sign up for that. And you all are welcome to too. I want to thank you for listening and for the conversation. And I hope that, especially at our retreats where we get together, that we can have these conversations that I know for me it's harder to have within my church that I'm serving or place of ministry. But with colleagues, it's just kind of a good place to bounce stuff off of each other. And I feel like that's a good place for us to start too. And I'm really thankful that several of you had really good concrete suggestions. And just to say thank you for doing what you're doing in ministry, because even if a church is not called Reconciling, a welcoming statement or any form of welcome, especially as the pastor, is what people need, and especially young people. Always teens and young adults will be the closest to my heart. And those are the people that are kind of sometimes struggling the most and sometimes on their own. So that's who we really need to be looking out for and who we can often help.